and all of you back over here as well. I gather we have students, some of the faculty and administrators and families as well are involved. So I thank you very, very much for coming out to be a part of this conversation about the importance of higher education and the importance of dealing with affordability, which is something that we all understand is a major, major issue for our country. It was in 1965 that Lyndon Johnson announced the Higher Education Act and talked about how wrong it was in this country that too many people who were poor couldn't afford to get a higher education more than 40 years ago. What's happened over the years is not that we've moved forward, we've moved back. We've been retreating on that commitment over and over again. So the issue no longer is just the poor not being able to afford a higher education, but this has now reached into middle-income families who are faced with staggering costs, making decisions about futures based on their ability to pay tuition debt rather than the choices they may be making professionally. So I can't think of anything more important that we can talk about in a campaign or in leading this country than making a commitment to get back to the point where an education, a higher education, is something that ought to be available to every single American who wants that opportunity and should never be denied to anybody because they can't afford to do it. And every year we know now that some 170,000 students who would otherwise be going on to higher education, accepted, agreed, have completed their high school equivalency or their high school courses, make the decision not to go on to higher education because of cost. 170,000. And obviously in a century that's going to involve tremendous competition around the world, this country will have to have the best educated generation we have ever produced. If it's true that in the 20th century, higher education commitments, as well as education commitments, created a middle class or had a lot to do with it, and certainly improved the quality of life for millions of people in our country. And you can go back and just look at the various things we did with either Title I or the GI Bill efforts, along with the Higher Education Act that I've mentioned. Certainly the 21st century can create those, make those opportunities pale by comparison if we make the kind of investments and decisions that I think are going to be critical. And as a candidate, but more importantly as President of the United States, it would be a high priority for me to see once again that we deal with the affordability of higher education at every single level. So I want to talk a bit about those costs and what we can do about it and some very specific ideas. I'm not going to be telling anyone in this room something you probably don't already know. The average cost of a private education, higher education per year is $30,000. At a public institution, it's around $13,000. That's average. Obviously, we all know cases where those numbers are higher, various institutions, and they're growing. The cost of a public education is increasing at 5.5% a year. That's twice the rate of inflation, at least recently here. And at a private school, it's increasing at 7%. I think those numbers are the reverse of that. I think it's reversed. 7% at a public, 5.5 at a private institution, but more than double the rate of inflation. And so the numbers keep going up. And as I say, as someone who has a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, I start doing the math. And if it continue those rates, I'm going to have to find a new line of work, I guess, here to meet those costs. But obviously, it's not a joke at all when you start looking at where these numbers are going. While at the same time, obviously, there is a general recognition that without providing the ability for people to afford these costs, it's going to be less and less attainable for too many people. Or people making decisions, as I said earlier, about career choices based on not what they think they can do, but what they have to do in order to meet those financial obligations. So for all of these reasons, and more that I'm sure all of you can add to the debate of why this is important, I thought it was important to come to an institution like the New Hampshire Community Technical College and announce some very specific ideas on how we can get there. I'm very pleased, by the way, that Eli Broad of the what's it called, the 2008 8 and 08 Foundation, although not endorsing it as a foundation, have strongly endorsed the plans that I'll announce here this morning on how we can deal with some of these issues.